Now let's dive deep into this big LGBT story today. I'm Larry Farver, and let's queer up politics. Trump signs executive order banning federal support of gender-affirming care. In a controversial move, President Trump has signed an executive order aimed at restricting federal funding and support for gender-affirming care for transgender minors and some adults. The order, titled Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation, targets puberty blockers, hormone therapies, and surgeries for those under 19. Trump called these treatments, quote, harmful and irreversible, end quote, urging federal agencies to withdraw support and enforce stricter laws against them. The order says across the country today, medical professionals are maiming and sterilizing a growing number of impressionable children from under the radical and false claim that adults can change a child's sex through a series of irreversible medical interventions. This dangerous trend will be a stain on our nation's history, and it must end. The order directs the Department of Health and Human Services to reassess and update medical guidelines for gender-affirming care. HHS is tasked with reviewing existing research on gender dysphoria and creating new guidelines, while the Department of Justice will investigate healthcare providers and enforce tighter legal measures against what the order refers to as, quote, deceptive practices, end quote. The order also mandates that the Department of Defense remove gender coverage for gender-affirming care under TRICARE, the military's healthcare system. Additionally, the Office of Personnel Management is instructed to negotiate reduced premiums by removing coverage for pediatric transgender treatments under federal employee health plans. Whistleblower protections are demanded for those who oppose gender-affirming treatments within healthcare systems. Critics, including the LGBTQ plus groups and the medical professionals, have condemned the order as discriminatory and harmful, particularly to our transgender youth already facing mental health struggles. Human Rights Campaign President Kelley Robinson said, questions about this care should be answered by doctors, not politicians, end quote. Well, there's so much to talk about here. First of all, I worry about, the potential of our youth being affected. We've talked tonight and earlier stories about higher suicide rates, and I wonder, for these youth who might not enjoy or receive the care that they need to go through the transformation, that how their mental health is going to be addressed. It's profound just, growing up as a gay person. I can't even imagine, being in a state where you're either starting the process or you think that you're going to go through and having the carpet pulled out in terms, it's a small population, as I know, we've talked about, but it's so important that, people realize that it's not something where you just flip a switch and a decision's made to medically change someone from male to female or female to male. And I think it's just abhorrent that, there are people at the wheel who are making these decisions. And that's where we need to have a voice and support these folks and do what we can. And I'm not sure, how it'll be vetted out, but, in the prior story, you talked about some of the folks like the Harriet Tubmans, Oscar Schindlers. I don't know how the mechanics of this would work, but that maybe we have to have almost an underground process so that these children can get care in the appropriate way.
This is what's problematic, is you see the cruelty, the hate,
Yes.
basically trying to erase the existence of transgender people, adults and youth, by any way possible. Either we have talked here many times about what's going on with Sarah McBride in Congress and using the bathroom. It's just, but they think minor things. And they're talking about, prohibiting what they call men, practicing women's sports, meaning trans women. So, and this is something that, as the quote at the end said, is something to be discussed between the patient, their parents, and their doctor, maybe their minister or whoever they decide to get involved in their discussion or the decision making, not for government to get involved in here. So, and many of these kids that are going through this depend on these measures to be able to survive. They don't consider this, and in many cases, these kids that are already, vulnerable, decide with their parents and their doctors that this is what's most required in order to survive. So these are the people saying by one side of the mouth that they shouldn't compete in sports. Well, kids, when they go through this process, this transition before puberty, don't develop into, male bodies, basically, later on. You block this and these people, but they don't want it any either way, not after or not before. So it's just basically, by all means, trying to erase the existence of transgender people. So it's cruel, and history will tell us.
The important thing for me in all that you're saying, we've discussed this ad nauseum for the last, I don't know how many, 10,000 episodes. How many episodes have we had? The danger in this event is not just they're doing what they said through Project 2025. They're doing what they said through their campaigning. They're doing what they said through their legal voting. The danger of this is that the language, they're changing the historical verbiage. Referring to this as mutilation.
Right.
They're changing the language to something that in years to come, if this continues, they may not be successful in the next 3 or 4 years, because to change the process on a government as large as the United States, with the funding and the bureaucracy, it's going to take a year or two to even get this to the point where they can discuss it without legal capability. So they're trying to reorganize everything through the thought process, through the verbiage, through the language, through the tone of the transcripts.
Right.
That's the dangerous part here. We've been fighting for as long as gay people have been alive. We have been on this earth, and it's since the creation of man. We have been fighting for recognition and existence and safety and health and everything. Donald Trump and the Republicans, and it hurts me to say his name, Donald Trump and the Republicans are changing the mindset. And that's the dangerous part, because how many generations did it take for the Nazis to lose their power, or the KKK to lose their power? It's the language here. The legalities, the business model, the finances and all that, that's going to be in years to come. But this is, how many executive orders has he changed where it's all about the language, and it's about the hate that you can read into it and feel it as you're reading it. That's the dangerous part, because that's the foundation.
Yeah, to your point, this is about the indoctrination, right?
Exactly.
Of their cult, right? Of the people who believe, who are not educated, who don't have enough information, who are just going to follow this cultish thinking. And so that's exactly what you're talking about. He's indoctrinating people with the language that they're using.
And I'll give you an example out of my own family. I have a very liberal aunt. I love her dearly. She's been a Republican for many years, and I dare not bring up the topic with her. But at one point before the election, I said, okay, my life is on the line. What are you doing? And she goes, well, it's about trans. And I said, shut up. That's less than 0.01% of the population. You're making your entire vote based on hearsay and 0.01% of a population. Well, I don't like. How many people have you known in my life that are trans? You're destroying their lives. And so we got into a very bitter, not a bitter, but a very difficult conversation. And I know she voted for him.
Well, but this is why they use the Q words such as protect our children. So let's protect our children. So obviously trans people are the language they're using to create fear, and then obviously who doesn't want to protect our children?
Allegations of grooming and recruiting and expanding.
And guess where all that language came from? That all came from World War II and the Nazi propaganda to create the illusion that gay men are pedophiles and perverts and grooming. That's all from World War II. So it's just we're rehashing the the old story. And, we need to do our homework. We need to go and read back on World War II. We need to read back on KKK. Hate is hate. It's easy to hate. It's hard to love.
And to your point, Betty, you said it earlier, and we kind of alluded to it, but it's that bait and switch again.
Yeah.
Focusing on those words,
Yes.
while it's hacking a small percentage, as you pointed out, but it's the language at the end of the day that is forming things that it's going to be very difficult to
and
change.
generational to
Right.
stop.
Right.
One last thing, the politics of this is or the irony of this is that, conservatives tend to stay out of my
Right.
my family, smaller
It's
government.
their family.
But it's their family, not your family. And the fact that, they're so, they're interjecting themselves in people's conversations, in the conversation between a parent, a child, and a doctor is just so ironic, right? Because that's so not what the Conservative Party, quote unquote, stands for. But to your point, buddy, it's about your family, not my family. Like, stay out of my family, but your family will go and we'll be able to say what we want and create policies that impact your family, but don't impact my family. Don't impact my family.
And we need to separate the Republicans from the MAGA Republicans, because the Republicans used to be conservative based on smaller government, less government my life. It doesn't exist because the MAGAs are now coming at you and they're microscoping every little detail to the point where they're pretty soon going to be telling you what peanut butter to eat because it supports Donald Trump and he gets an extra $1.50 for every jar sold.
The core of this, and I wrote a piece on this recently, was the lack of information, the lack of knowledge, and the fact that Donald Trump and his cronies benefit from an uneducated populace that will just believe anything that comes out of their mouths as fact. And the inability to discern what's fact and fiction.
And the religious, right? The religious base.
But the religious base does the same thing. They twist as they need to, and they sugarcoat when they want. To do a little homework for anyone watching this episode, to understand the premise and the vocabulary and the language skills of this, I encourage everyone to go to the Washington, D.C.'s museum, Holocaust Museum, because there's a traveling exhibit inside the museum that we brought down here to Fort Lauderdale in 2005 called Nazi Persecution of Homosexuals, 1934 to 1945. It's an amazing display. It's on display at the Holocaust Museum in D.C. I believe it's online, so you can do a little homework. But it shows you step by step how the language was designed and the images, the graphics, the photographs, the cartoons were designed not only to hurt the Jewish population, but most specifically the gay population, gay males specifically, because lesbians could make babies, so that was not something we destroyed. But gay men we could destroy. And I encourage everyone to do just a little homework and spend 20 minutes and see that.
No, buddy, great point. On Monday, Monday was the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and so I continue to realize that I have lots of younger people in my organization. And so what I did was, to your point, is I sent them a link to a video that gave like a Holocaust 101, because I recognize that I have a bunch of 20-something-year-olds who don't know, who may not have the information. And so I'm glad that you pointed out that resource. It is a rich resource. The museums, the website, they have all these like small like PowerPoint and small videos. They're engaging, so it's not like boring. You can really learn a lot from this, and I'm glad that you pointed out this.
And even more so, I just remembered, and I don't mean to delay this conversation, but the language has also been absorbed by certain religious organizations, meaning the far right religious community. And so it's important as you're reading through and watching this exhibition that you sit there and go, how did they manipulate the language? How did they manipulate that sentence? How did they put fear into people's hearts? And it's every stereotype that we see that's against us and even sometimes for us, the Nelliest man in a skirt trying to rape a little girl in a bathroom, that all comes from the Nazis. And it's in the exhibition. So I encourage you to please visit the Holocaust Museum website.
That is a big LGBTQ story for today. There's no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support LGBTQ stories by subscribing and sharing Queer News Tonight.